Hello, everyone on the internet. Welcome
Happy
to,
days
yes, happy days. Welcome
are here
to
again.
uh, year three of the Iron Edge pandemic. I don't know. We've
Yeah,
this is
welcome to Febtober.
Febtober. We've established ourselves as being remote for 1 year. As of last week, we celebrated our paniversary, which was very nice. So our company's been
I'm
remote for a
impressed that we're
year.
making up words to describe where we're at now.
It's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. Very, very I mean, it's been since the beginning we've been making up stuff. So, but
No different on today's webinar topic of getting back to the office as
yep,
as the breaking news out of Texas last couple of weeks is reopening the state. 100%. Come on, no mask mandate, and we're seeing it already. Traffic has increased tenfold just in the last 7 days. I've been out there.
yeah, it's amazing. Just really excited about really excited about actually like having to figure out how to undo what we did a little bit and or change it again. I know this has been a big disruption for a lot of companies. So, we're going to get into that a little bit today. First, we'll talk a little bit about who IronEdge is. IronEdge is Texas-based business. We've been around for 16 years now, 17 years. How long has it been?
It'll be 16 in July.
16 years in July. So 16 years. We focus on organizations who are in need of security, business continuity, looking to help with strategy with their IT. We give them peace of mind, help make sure that their stuff's protected and they have good backups. Anything that you could want out of an IT department that you can't afford to bring on a full-time staff to do, you can outsource through IronEdge Group, and we'll provide you a talented team of individuals to help solve your IT problems, including CIO and CTO level guidance from your account managers. So keep that in mind when you're looking for a provider, or if you know somebody who is. That's the end of the sales pitch. My name is Andrew Moore. I am the COO of IronEdge Group. I'm in charge of some of our marketing and sales, and I hop on these webinars in order to just talk, just tell you stuff. And this is Ryan Lakin. Ryan Lakin
Howdy.
he's the owner of IronEdge Group, and he is one of the founding members of the organization. And he has got almost 20 years experience in IT solutions providing, and also is really good at consulting with businesses on how they should invest and strategize on their IT needs. So we thought it would be important to get together and talk a little bit about what's been going on with the remote workforce and what it's going to be like to get back to an office, simply because I was kind of helping out to figure out what we were going to do strategically and from a process standpoint for ourselves and our clients as we went remote. And Ryan has been working more on the business impact of those things and the financial management of those areas. And so together with his understanding of how it's been affecting other businesses from his peer groups and in the business community, and my understanding of how it's been kind of affecting us and our clients, we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to get together and talk a little bit about going back and what that looks like.
I mean, people are going to see a live conversation because we have to start having this conversation. Even our team is some want to go back, some don't. Here's where we are.
Yep. So that kind of brings us to breaking news, which, I don't trust like any of the news channels anymore because everything is breaking news. So we're just
Have you noticed that? You hear a lot of dun, 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 breaking news.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep a cryon
like
across
every
the
top of
bottom
the hour
of Teams, and it's just going to say breaking news for every meeting I have. It's going to be amazing. They should have that. They should have like the ability, like if you can do fake backgrounds, you should be able to create your own cryons for like.
That's a great idea. I think we can handle that in post-production if this wasn't live.
Yeah, it'll be breaking news.
It's just like you're just a scroll the whole time.
Yeah, that'd be good. Well, one of the things that we thought was important to touch on, and I'll drop out of the presentation for a second so we can kind of riff on it for a minute. But what we have found over the last year is that there's no we talked a lot about the cloud adoption, right? And one of the things that we found very early on is the pandemic started, we assumed that a significant number of organizations were probably just going to stop doing anything. And some did, right? They just stopped spending money. But there were a lot of organizations that were like, well, we were planning on going to the cloud anyway, and we really need to do this. So let's go ahead and spend the money. And this whole thing got accelerated where people were kind of waiting to go to the cloud, waiting for their hardware warranties to expire, or waiting to see what the next thing was going to be before they committed to it. And now we've had this rush of people moving all of their infrastructure into cloud environments, whether that's public clouds like Microsoft's Azure or their 365 solution, or AWS for Amazon solution, or in the Google cloud, or moving their infrastructure into on-premise solutions, right? Or into co-location solutions as part of private cloud systems, where they stand up a rack of servers at a colo and move all their stuff so that they can get it out of their offices, because people aren't in those offices like they used to be. And it doesn't make sense for them to stay there, especially when you look at what happened with Texas and our
The
emergency
deep
power
freeze
situation.
of 2021.
A lot of organizations are really kind of questioning whether or not they want to keep their infrastructure in their office buildings when most of their staff is remote. So there's another large push that you see, which happens sometimes after a really bad hurricane here in Texas. People freak
They'll
out.
have that 3-month push of, hey, let's fix this, and then it gets expensive and the weather has passed. I just don't think that we're going back. We're at new. Like, they've made this investment over the last year to move more and more to cloud-based software, cloud-based email, cloud-based everything, in order to better facilitate that connectivity with remote workers not being in the office. That only helps during a natural disaster such as Snowmageddon or Hurricane Harvey or whatever we've experienced in the Texas market over the last 5 years. So I don't think we go back. But what is that new normal? What is that next step in evolution for those organizations? As you have staff saying, hey, things are opening back up. I've got my vaccine. I want to go back in the office. Kinda. And I think our informal poll of even our team is people are eager to see each other in person. We're seeing more and more of it. But there's also this desire to not sit in rush hour traffic for 3 hours a day out of your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think part of it too is, as we look at this adoption strategy, there were a lot of organizations that prior to the pandemic that were providing these services, whether that's Microsoft or whether it was Zoom or even AWS, like they had development cycles that were pretty aggressive for adoption. Like Microsoft's Power BI and Microsoft's 365 product were coming out with a lot of new features. Their product development cycle blew through the roof over the last 6 months as people became dependent upon these products and the resiliency of the infrastructure there. And so a lot of organizations have found that the limitations that they thought would be there to moving their stuff into the cloud, whether that's a compliance problem, whether that's a functionality problem, whether that's we just don't want to take the time to teach our staff how to work with these new tools, all that's gone because these new products have been developed in such a way where they're now way more robust. They're way more secure. Oh, and by the way, people have been working mostly remote for the last year anyway. So everybody's kind of already adopted it.
They've gotten used to it. There's no going back. Where can we go from here?
So that kind of brings us to, our first real point of conversation, which we're going to kind of walk you through some of the things we've been thinking about for us and our clients, and kind of get an understanding of what we think is going on and how we're going to start tackling the next step. But for us, we don't believe that many companies will ever go back to being fully integrated to an on-premise solution when it comes to having their staff in an office. There will, I think, from here on out, always be some level of some people not being in the office regularly, right?
I would agree. I mean, there's going to be this component of remote. I mean, I've seen it just with other business owners where they've started hiring outside of their geographic area. Heck, we've done it. It's like there's now talent out there we're looking to grow and build, and those people never step foot in an office.
Right.
It's really rethought the entire HR process, but it makes you think of, okay, with us going back now, with this now permanently hybrid workforce, how do we adapt to that change? How do we build our space? How do we think about our conference rooms differently, where not everybody's just walking down the hall to go into a meeting room? We're going to have 3, 4, maybe just one person remotely that lives in Arkansas. Little different than a company that was, a year and a half ago, 100% sitting in their office.
Well, and I think for us too, and I think a lot of organizations that look at having their companies have multiple locations, right? There are quite a few organizations that'll have more than one office. Some don't, but a lot do. And for those organizations, I know that there's always been a struggle with, well, that's just how the Austin branch does things, or that's just how the Galveston branch does things, right? Or the St. Louis branch, right? And I think that if organizations really take the time to start figuring out what it means to come back from the pandemic, they can implement solutions that will solve problems that they realize they kind of worked through in a different way. They just kind of dealt with pre-pandemic by being able to create processes and technologies and protocols that allow everybody remotely or in an office to work together more effectively. And this is really going to change organizations' profitability. It's going to change their ability to do market penetration if they're adopting these tools. Just like when they went remote, they had to have adopted the tool appropriately, or they were just kind of pushing their way through it. It was difficult. Like it wasn't quite like being in the office, right? Everybody was still trying to do things like they did at the office at home using these tools. The same thing's going to happen. And it might be as painful when you go back into an office, because you're going to have all these people that are kind of remote in a lot of sense, right? Some permanently, some partially. And you're going to go back to drive-bys and, water cooler talk and quick meetings that you're going to try to get somebody on a Zoom call with. And it may not work right? So you really have to start understanding what your space is going to look like, right? Who's going to be allowed into the office, how often they're going to be in the office, how comfortable they are being in the office. The last thing employers want to do is lose good talent because they're forcing their employees to go back into an office, maybe before they feel safe, or maybe they become accustomed to working remotely. So organizations start to ask themselves these questions like, what do I do with my space? What do I do with my employees? How far do I push it?
How functional can you be completely hybrid?
Yeah.
I mean, you touched on a good point about the walk-bys. The thing I think most folks miss the most is that camaraderie, that walk-by, that 4-second conversation at the water cooler. Those aren't happening. Every meeting, we've touched on this in some of the last webinars we've done over the last year, but every meeting is now intentional. Every conversation is intentional, whether it be on Teams or Zoom or Slack, whatever your organization uses. You're intentionally making that connection to the other person. You're not just bumping into them and having a chat. So what happens when now, let's say 50% of your workforce is back in the physical office, 50% is remote? You now come into this, and I hate to use the culture word, where some people have better relationships with those remotely. So it has to be a cognizant feeling up on the part of the employer to ensure that those that are hybrid or remote, those that are in the office, it's not a different feeling. So how do you bring everybody together? How do you still have that camaraderie when some folks are bumping into each other at the water cooler and some people live in Dallas?
Well, and how does your space work, right? And those are the questions you need to start asking yourself is, first of all, when we look at our space, right, and how much we've taken down as a business, a lot of us, including us, we have a service center. Like we have a lot of cubes, right? And they've got high walls on them now with glass and whatnot, and plexi, and right. But when we look at what we do as an organization, do we want to have a bunch of people stacked in there? Like it was funny, even pre-pandemic, if anybody would show up to work, with heavy allergies, like there was a whole lot of like, hey, you need to be here. Like, can you work remotely today?
I don't want you to get me sick, man.
Yeah, we don't want you to take the herd down with it, because you're showing up. So I think there's still some of that's going to happen. I think there's still going to be some PTSD, honestly, about being in an office in a confined space with a group of people. So then you have to start figuring out
one cough and everybody's racing to the exits.
Yeah. And, so as you start to turn your office back on, the conversation needs to be like, okay, how many people need to be in this density? Right. And then you need to start deciding like the technology that sits on those desks for that density, right? Do you need to have docking stations at every cube, or can you do every other cube? Do you need to have special conference rooms that are Teams rooms? They're enabled through the systems so that they can be built to create like special conference spaces for collaboration. what types of technology tools do you want to have in those rooms? Do you have pens that you can share what you're doing on whiteboards? Because that's such a critical part of when people are physically together, they're writing things down and doing that sort of thing so that they can share information. Like, these are things that companies need to start figuring out and start to figure out how they can schedule their employees to come in the office and do work. And one of the things we found, which we saw online, which we like, and we're going to be looking at a little bit for ourselves and our clients. We're not a partner for these people, but we found this product called Robin Powered, and it looks pretty cool. And it seems to be one of these places that you can go on the internet to basically start building out mapping information for your office space, right? People can use their cell phones to start checking in and out of space at your offices so that you can have capacity matching. So you can say, hey, today is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. These people are supposed to be here. And Tuesday, Thursday, these folks are going to be here. It has in-out boards. So you can see who's going to be in the office and who's going to be out of the office. It's really interesting. And you can get some reporting on how people are using their office space, right? So that you can start making determinations about what areas might need to be expanded and which ones might need to be torn down. And really get an understanding, which is very important until we're out of this pandemic, like who's been there, right? So if somebody happens to have an illness, maybe that's a contact trace type situation. You want to let a few of the other folks who are in the office with them know, right? So you can make sure that your team stays safe. So there are applications on the market that can provide you.
There's 1,000 others that we haven't even found yet.
Right.
But it's interesting because it does allow you to kind of come back to the office in a way where at least there's some visibility to it.
Right.
Right. And one of the big concerns that I have with our team coming back is like, all right, is everybody going to come back? I can tell you right now, with everybody I talk to, not just on our team, but out there, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday being in the office is the most popular. Yep. So you've got, 10,000, 20,000 square feet office space that everybody wants to use on Wednesday. So you need all the space to fully occupy. But Monday and Friday, it's going to be a ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that functions as a business owner. I look at that going, okay, well, that's not a real fair and equitable way of doing it, because why would I just pay for office space on Wednesday? Unless somebody invents the new WeWork where you can just rent an entire building on Wednesday. I don't see how that real estate landlord makes money, but that's the real challenge. So I think there is going to be this scheduling, this communication of when do people want to work. I think one of the best ideas I saw, because I look at it from, I like having my office. I like having my space. I like to have my photos up on the wall. I like to kind of have my little world, which normally looks a lot messier than what you guys see on television. And I want to share that with somebody else necessarily. But I heard of a really interesting way of handling this that some companies are doing. Is it's not hot desking, where it's like everybody just pick whatever's available and you get a random desk every time you come in, but co-desking. So you only share that desk with one other person and your schedules don't overlap. So it's like, okay, I've got my lateral files on the left and, Jane has hers on the right, and I work Mondays and Fridays in the office, or Monday and Tuesdays, and she's working Wednesday, Thursdays, but we share the same desk. So it's still ours, kinda. I think that's a great solution for companies that still have the floor plan or the floor plan to support it, but not everybody's going to be there at the same time. So the co-desking thing, I'm really eager to explore more into, because I think it might be a solution to those folks that, hey, I want to work, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays. Okay, whoever else is in Monday, Tuesday, they co-desk buddies. You've got an accountability buddy.
Well, and when we talked to, one of the things that we had mentioned was nomadic workforce, right? Where people are going to be out and about, not just being at their desk, right? So, one of the things that we want to stress to folks that we hear about from a business perspective is like, yeah, I can probably work from California for a week. Like, I'll just take like a vacation from my house and I'll work out there, and I'll, go to dinners and stuff and see friends in the afternoons and evenings, right, while I'm working. Like, that's fine. But at some point, like, if you are there for like an entire summer or there for an extended period of time, like, now you're starting to get into like these weird issues where people's technology may wind up traversing multiple states who have different laws about how you're supposed to be maintaining data. They may wind up having issues with the way that the accounting practices work for your finances and how you get taxed based on which state you're working in and what your employment law looks like. So we just want to warn folks as they're going back into the office. These are things we've been thinking about, and we're just like a technology company, but we're having to really consider what it means to provide that level of flexibility. Thank God Texas is massive, so we can allow people to be kind of anywhere within the state. But it's something to consider, and I know it's something you brought up about.
Yeah, no, I was, I know that we've been looking at, again, growing and adding to our staff and looking at hiring even out of state. But that does open a huge amount of tax and compliance liability to the organization, and how you deal with not only the HR laws in different states of wherever residency is, but the nomadic workforce. The laws will catch up, but they never move as fast as people do. And so you're going to see this. We've already had a nomadic workforce, I think, in a lot of ways for the last year. People have picked up like, hey, I'm going to go to the beach for 3 months. I'm going to go to Costa Rica while they were open, or I'm going to go live in Mexico. I have friends that moved to Mexico for 2 months. I'm like, I don't even know how you get that visa. But nonetheless, it's happening, and they're working from there. That opens up a whole slew of compliance issues, both HR and legal, not to mention the cybersecurity ones. And that's the real big, I think, shift as we look at this new normal. I always hated that term, but here's where we are at. The new normal of hybrid cloud not going away. It's only going to grow. Ultimate employer and employee flexibility. How do we secure this? I mean, there's been, I think, 3 breaches this week alone of massive organizations that have hit the wires. The breaking news earlier. Okay, yeah, there's more cybersecurity problems. An insurance company is down right now, this moment, massive insurance company, because of a cyber breach on their internal systems. So how are you going to secure your business with these nomadic workforce, this change in the workforce dynamic of being hybrid?
And we'll talk about communications tools in a minute. We were actually going to hit that, but this segues so much better into the security thing, and we'll get into kind of the tools here in a minute. But the security part of what we're going to talk about is this really, a lot of organizations, it doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter if you're a 10-person organization or a 10,000 person organization. You normally, before the pandemic, had a perimeter system, and people would come into this office. A lot of people. Now, of course, there were VPNs and remote access and stuff like that. But for the most part, a large chunk of things that needed to be secured were secured within this environment, right? They had.
Would you call it a wall? Kind of like a firewall?
Like they were firewalled. They had perimeter systems, right? The edge of your network was very much built around the infrastructure that you maintained yourself as an organization. And as people began to move to the cloud and people began to become remote and picking up their laptops and taking them out of the office for extended periods of times, months, and in some cases, like our company, year or more, where they're not physically in an office to be secured or scanned or updated in some fashion, which used to be the way things worked. Now organizations have to really understand the security model from a technology standpoint of this disparate workforce, securing those assets at people's homes, at the Cancun resort, right? At their mother-in-law's house. Yeah, like in the airport again, which is something that was semi-normal, but these are things that people need to start considering because they're now more and more prevalent rather than being the exception for just, the sales team or the executive staff. And now you've got everybody in the organization working in this capacity. So
and making it work when they're coming and going. Because for the last year, we've just been going
right
to our house and fairly static there. But now you've got people that are coming in and out. They're going from their home, working there a couple of days, coming back into the office. Before the pandemic, that was a huge security concern. Like, oh yeah, you plugged into your Wi-Fi at home. What did your kids do to your computer? What happened? So I think that a lot of that security wall, if you will, that firewalling has certainly been shifting over the last year to being the perimeter fence around your corporate headquarters and where your servers live, to really being that endpoint where the user is. We need to build firewalls around that employee and where they work versus around the entire organization.
In the new adoption that's starting to happen that we're seeing in the security field, which is the more advanced component of security, outside of just the securing of the end user assets, is really pushing your perimeter from your firewalls and your physical infrastructure and assets up to the cloud, up to Microsoft 365 using
where you moved your data.
Right.
Your data is the valuable thing you're protecting, right? That's why you have locks on your doors, is to protect your personal belongings. Well, your data is your organization's personal belongings. How are we securing that now that we're using this software as a service application and this Office 365 for our email and the list goes on.
And normally what would happen is in larger organizations or more compliant organizations, they would have log aggregation systems called SIMs, right? And this, information would all be gathered into one place and analyzed. And so some of that still exists, but now they're pushing more of this up to the cloud. And so there are these new models called the SASE model, and it actually is building out the security and analytics component to the cloud systems itself. And it's creating a more, it's creating a better security model that is encompassing of this disparate way that we take in and receive and input data into our infrastructure, where it's not local to a file storage system and it's not local to a database that you have, because it could be in AWS and Azure and Google and all these different things that need to be combined to be secured as a more comprehensive package. And what we've noticed is, over the last year specifically, as we talked about earlier when we talked about cloud adoption, the changes that have been made by the organizations that run these public clouds like Microsoft has been frenetic in the way that it's come out on the security side. So before, when you put everything in Office 365, you kind of had to like figure out how to secure it. And some of the security was, pretty perfunctory, right? It was, making sure you've got password management on, or even to the point of using multi-factor authentication, which I think is one of the most important security things you can do now. And I think that the other day, Microsoft came out and said that password changes are no longer the de facto. So this is interesting. I don't know if you've heard this.
I didn't read
breaking
this.
News. I was told that by a smart person on our team, and I hope that they're right, that Microsoft and others are no longer saying you need to change your password every 90 days, that you just need to make the most complicated, like 20-character password you possibly can, like a randomly generated password, and then just use multi-factor authentication.
It makes sense, because there's a hole in the security kind of process where that change password process is a gap that could be exploited potentially.
It causes problems.
The guard is down for a second, not to mention it breaks everything.
Right.
From a single sign-on standpoint.
It keeps people from having to change the password to something that they used to remember too.
I think the long tail future, and this products are just starting to come to market with it, is there is no more password. And that's going to be revolutionary.
Right.
But passwords go away. It's a passwordless future. It's all based on MFA and dual trust. It's going to be really interesting. But you're talking more about that compliance manager stuff. There's tons of tools that are coming to market because everyone has the same problem you do. The data is now in the cloud. They're in multiple applications and different softwares or service places. How do you secure that? Every single one's going to be a little bit different.
Right. And they all have their own quirks, right? So Microsoft has got an Azure compliancy component. Microsoft 365 has one with Compliance Manager. Google has one. AWS has one. So the interesting thing for Microsoft, which is really great, is they've got these kind of basic templates that they've included with the product. They have these premium templates you can pay a little bit more for, and they're, as we had told you, they're sometimes state-specific compliancy. There's country-specific compliancy. One of the things that we really like and that we're a big fan of in regards to starting to roll this out is the governance and compliance frameworks they have, right? So they got one for the NIST CSF, right? Cybersecurity framework. They've got the 8171 for DFARS and CMMC. They've got PCI DSS, right? 3.2. So you can actually start running through some of these once you apply them, and it will generate a score for you and give you places when you run this to tell you whether or not you have deficiencies, and then you can work through those deficiencies and further secure your cloud environment, and then run these on a regular basis so you can stay on top of stuff, because there's honestly more things than you will ever be able to remember when it comes to configuring these solutions to make them secure. And they change again every couple of weeks as they come out with new security protocols, new features and functionality, because every time there's a new feature, there's a new thing that can be exposed or hacked.
every single time. Even that document you were showing, that the web page was last updated, what, 6 days ago?
Yeah.
That's from when we're recording this. That's how quickly things are changing. I didn't mention this, but with Office 365 is only one silo of your data. Mm-hmm. Think about where else your data is. Is it in Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, G Suite, all of these sort of things? The biggest challenge that IT practitioners have today is keeping track of where the data is and keeping track of the alerts and alarms. I was just this week talking with the CEO of a new startup company called SaaS Alerts. And what SaaS Alerts is doing is trying to pull all that reporting data together and correlate it just for cloud applications, not trying to be crazy with it with cybersecurity, but every cloud application has some sort of logging mechanism, some sort of alerting mechanism, and they're all disparate. They're all different. And so they're bringing it all together through API, which is really interesting because then it gives the IT security staff the ability to have that single dashboard to say, hey, I got an alert that this guy's logging in from, Costa Rica and from Los Angeles within an hour of each other. That's not right. That's physically impossible. And correlating that with then an alert from Dropbox or an alert from Salesforce saying they're logging in from China, Russia. I mean, a great indicator of you have a problem. Or one of these security compliance checklists aren't getting mapped right. You're getting errors that says, hey, you're not doing this, this, and this. You have a dashboard to do it. So I think the tools are evolving as the technology adoption has been growing. The market is there.
Yeah, it was really interesting for us as a technology firm a few years ago as we talked about software as a service and cloud adoption. We began to wonder as an organization, what does that mean for technology? If there aren't servers to fix and to monitor, what will we do? Well, the answer has now become unequivocally, you will make sure that you have a very strong, secure, robust, and segmented network, and you will make sure that you are very familiar with the cloud and how these applications work. Because one of the things that a lot of organizations don't realize is there was a lot of functionality that you would have with on-premise systems, but a lot of those things came turned off. They weren't configured by default. You would have to enable certain functions of those systems, whether that's SQL or Exchange or whatever those were. When you move into the cloud and you open a tenancy in Azure or 365, there's a lot of stuff that comes turned on by default.
And they changed that.
Yeah.
As more people are adopting it and almost the kind of consumerization of IT in the cloud and what the cloud has provided, you click and you have an app on your iPhone now. But they've kind of swung the pendulum to where, okay, we're going to go with the most secure, or at least a 80% secure versus what they used to sell 2 years ago was a 0% secure, bring your own security, check all these boxes. We might write a how-to article for you, but it really was left up to the consumer or the corporate IT team or the IT service provider. And now they've kind of swung it back over saying, hey, if you guys aren't going to check these boxes, we're going to do it for you and make you uncheck what you need to do, which is certainly in my opinion, better methodology.
There's just so much to configure though. Even when you turn on Teams, right? You're like, I'm going to enable Teams. There's a lot to consider. Like, how do you want to interact with people outside of your organization? What information do you want to share? Mm-hmm. Do you want to integrate the right license component with, the data loss prevention that's built into 365? Do you want to turn that on? Do you want to archive your email as part of a, solution? Are you backing that stuff up? And I think that kind of brings us to the last thing we're going to talk about today, which are communication tools, right? And how those can affect the environment as we move back into a hybrid solution, right? Where you're both in the office and you're out of the office, right? So we talked a little bit about what the space might look like and what types of technology you could implement in order to kind of manage the space a little bit. Then we've talked a little bit about how the security overlay for that is really important because people are still going to be coming and going out of your offices and accessing your data since you've now rapidly adopted all of this cloud stuff over the last year. But there's an opportunity for a lot of organizations to catch their breath maybe a bit. And I say that kind of almost like loosely a little bit because from what I heard today, they said that there's a potential that the economy could grow by up to 6% this year. And they're rapidly adopting new metrics around that based on the money that was pumped into the economy and businesses reopening and consumer confidence coming back. Like, this could be a year where we're seeing a breakneck pace for businesses expanding and growing.
I'm kind of concerned about it, honestly, because I'm seeing that boots on the ground.
Yeah.
In my peer groups and my business owner network, everybody is busy. Like, everybody's growing, everybody's hiring. They can't find the right staff. They can't find people to apply for jobs. And then you've got actually the consumers out there spending money. And you and I both know you make hay while there's hay to be made.
Yeah.
So I think we are going to see this breakneck 2021 as everybody's kind of just rushing to the relief of, hey, we're back, let's go. And I think we're going to see some breakneck speed. And we don't want to lose sight of communicating with our team now that they're not all in the staff huddle every Monday morning in person,
right?
Or even on Teams. We've got this mix. So what are some of those communication tools that we can employ going forward in this new normal?
Well, and what we've seen is there's an integration of tools, right? So there's an opportunity to do some consolidation and stuff that we're currently looking at, and that we're working with our clients on. So Microsoft Teams for us has been fantastic. We love it. It's great. It integrates into the entire Office stack. We use it extensively. We use
all day long,
all day,
good, bad, or ugly. Here I am on Teams at 10:30 at night.
Well, we use, and one of the things that we like about it too is that because of some of the new technology they've adopted, like Microsoft Stream, it allows us to record meetings that we have internally and externally so that other people can watch them later for training purposes or just to remember what was going on, or if you're not available, which you never used to have that opportunity in a conference room, right? That's
now, nobody would turn on the audio recording or the video recording if nobody was remote.
Right. So those are some things that we really like, that we want to see people continue to adopt from a communication standpoint, is to keep moving that ball forward. Like, don't just abandon Teams or only use it when you're in a conference, right? When you've got 3 or 4 people. Like, if you need to communicate with somebody on the other side of the office, hit them up on Teams, right? If you can, like, if they're just across, like, if they're 50 steps from you, instead of getting up from your desk, if you don't feel like doing it, like, get on Teams. If you have something, what we found, what I thought was game changing at the very beginning of the pandemic, and it seems normal now, but at the time I would be in a meeting with Ryan, which normally, like, if we were together, we would just talk about it. We'd be in a conference room and I would bring up my laptop and I would have a bunch of spreadsheets and I would kind of be talking through some stuff, and he'd have his laptop. And then if he wanted to share something, I'd have to, like, plug the projector into his, or the TV into his computer. When we were collaborating, I would have my spreadsheets up. I'd have all my data in front of him. I could quickly share stuff. He could get into my documents in SharePoint and edit them for me while I was there with him. Like, we were able to collaborate in a way that we had never really been able to collaborate before, versus let's all get together, take a bunch of notes. We'll all retreat back to our offices, work on something, and then come back together and make sure that's exactly what we wanted. And it really eliminated some lost productivity.
I think it was more efficient, because you go into a conference room and you bring your laptop, you've got one little 14-inch screen in front of you. But what we've been able to do by being remote, being forced to have these kind of interactive meetings over Teams, is, yeah, you're right. I got one screen up that's my video with you, and what a whiteboard in Teams that we're talking through, plus the spreadsheets, plus the data source. Oh, I can quickly jump in and go straight to the source of truth on that data and dig into it, and honestly affect change immediately, versus saying, okay, well, I'll fix that back when I get to my office and I have my 2 monitors again, because it's so much easier for me to work like that. Now I've never stopped. So how do you bring that into this hybrid approach? And I'm seeing a huge influx, talking with audiovisual professionals that are out there, these Teams rooms. Conference rooms can't just have one TV anymore. It's not going to work. You're gonna need a multi-screen room in order to still work how you've been working in a fully remote standpoint. So yeah. I think that's where we're going to see even more investment, is these Teams rooms that are dual monitor, dual camera. Where was I? We were at a meeting and there was half the people were remote, half were on, and they had this really cool camera called the Owl camera. It's a 360-degree camera that sits in the middle of your conference table, and it has microphones built into all sides. Well, it moves the camera around on whoever's talking. So it's a panoramic 360, but then it does focused. And 4 people can talk at once on any side of the room, and it'll then crop the image to just those 4 people out of the 360.
That's cool.
Really cool. So there's all these tools that are out there. There's all this technology that kind of, again, enhances this communication tool, but what I think we need to be cognizant of is don't limit it to, oh, we're back, so we don't need these things anymore.
Right.
I think we're going to see further investment into new and innovative tools for these conference rooms to ensure that the traditional conference room of 2019 remains effective in 2021.
Yeah. And that comes back to, again, how we've learned to communicate. It's fun. And maybe I shouldn't admit this, and especially in front of Ryan, but I've been on my desk phone, I think 5 times total in the entire pandemic. I communicate almost entirely out of Teams, including meetings with external folks where I'm setting up communications with salespeople or clients or whatever. I like the ability to use video if they're willing to do it with me. I use my cell phone probably a little more than I have what I would call my traditional desk phone. I have a soft phone. It's built into my laptop. I have a VoIP system, and I've used it from time to time, but honestly, I haven't found the need for it. It hasn't been critical to me because I have these other communication tools. And I think what we're going to see, and Teams is really trying to push towards this, is a collapse of some of these traditional phone systems and whatnot into a more streamlined communications tool, right? So you're going to be able to make phone calls from Teams. You can do it right now. There's a limitation on some of the phones that you can use for it, right? It has to be approved, and some of them can be somewhat pricey. Because they basically are running a Teams client on them. But
they're coming down all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think you're exactly right. There's going to be this collapse, because I couldn't agree more with you. Like my 713 phone number that rings to my desk. Frankly, I don't even know why I put it on D&D for this webinar today. The only calls I get are either sales calls. But 9 times out of 10, even sales calls, they're hitting me up on LinkedIn or email, and they're scheduling a meeting, and we end up meeting through Teams. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to go as far as to make the prediction that the phone is dead, because it won't. I don't think it'll ever die, but it's shifted. I mean, my cell phone was just ringing in my pocket. I don't know what, probably a car warranty. That's really the only calls I get now, because everything is a scheduled and intentional communication. Does that shift as we go back, as more and more people go back in the office? I don't think it does. I think that's one of the components where the traditional phone only cold call may be on the way out. Every meeting is intentional now going forward. I'll make that prediction now, that every meeting, everything is a touch point of communication that leads to a Teams call, a Zoom meeting, some sort of interactive presence, right, versus just holding up that corded handset to your head. But I think as we look at these communication tools and implementing voice, how do you centralize your communication? I think Teams has done a great job of evolving over the last 12 months to be that central hub. And as you said, collapse in. Voice calls are now coming through Teams. My voicemail, if I get one, is going to be in Teams. It's going to, slowly but surely, I don't think we'll have a need for desk phones. Cell phones don't go away. And I mean, we've been using them. Like, you'll call me on Teams and I'll be in the car. I can answer on my cell phone.
Right.
I think we talk more 50% of the time like that versus here on the computer. So having that now hybrid, we'll use hybrid again, that communication platform that works across devices, that's going to continue, not going anywhere.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that the organizations that understand that, I really strongly believe that organizations that have taken to heart some of the things that we've talked about over the last year, which is really adopted a true strategy for being remote, right? And being available to support their community, support their employees, support their clients, and grow through that. If you can take the best of that and meld it with the best of team building and face-to-face interactions and having lunches with people again, and still being able to create this communication dynamic that allows everybody to be as productive as they had been during the pandemic, and building this work-life balance that I think sometimes got lost a little along the way because everybody was constantly jacked in. I think all of those things put together with the tools and the security, I think that you're going to see those companies accelerate past. I think that everybody's going to be successful this year. I really believe that. I think there's going to be a lot of success in business, but I think there's going to be a bunch of folks that are like, man, we've had a great year. And there's going to be a bunch of people who are like, I cannot believe how busy we've been. It has been amazing, because they've really allowed their teams to continue to be productive like they were during the pandemic, if they did it the right way.
Agreed. Now, the flip side of that is the risk of burnout is high. We're
Yeah.
coming off of this year of uncertainty. Everybody's like geared up, rah, rah, rah. The adrenaline is pumping. I can feel it in the air. I do worry about just people crashing. It's that sugar rush crash where it's like, oh, so we have to be cognizant of that, of how do we unplug people when they're not in the office or they're not online. You truly need to unplug. I mean, I've been preaching it for 6-7 months now to our team internally of like, take your PTO, even if you can't leave your house, turn it off. Otherwise it'll eat you. It'll consume you.
Right. But there's also a flip side to that too, right? Which I don't disagree with you. I think people do need to unplug. But one of the things that I thought was really nice, for even though you would disagree with me last week, I took PTO last week during spring break. But what I found was, and my wife did the same thing.
You say PTO, I say you were still available.
So, but here's the thing, right? There's a difference, I think, when I was like, I'm out doing something, I'm on a boat, I'm having lunch with my daughter, right? I don't feel obligated to answer my phone. You get me when you get me because I'm on PTO. And if you get me, great. I can respond when I want to respond. The pressure is off. If something important happens, I can pop on and be like, hey guys, here's some information, right? So for me, it was a little bit more helpful because I knew that when I came back, there would still be a pile of work to be done that got kind of pushed back from that week, but it wasn't like some of the most burning things I was able to address while I was on PTO, and I could do it in
The
my
pile
own
of work
time.
wasn't on fire when you showed up.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
smoldering.
Right. And the team does, in fairness to my team, they do a really good job of making sure everything, I can take PTO, right? I have a great group of people here that does that. So I don't want to make it sound like I came back to a smoldering pile of work, but I just say that because people can now work when they choose to work, where they want to work, and hopefully in a secure and highly collaborative way where they have everything that they need at their fingertips, you may wind up having people who can still be connected to what they're doing and find some way of disconnecting. I think we're going to see some changes in the way that people take time off.
The hybrid workforce is even further hybridized by the fact that, you know what, I'm just not going to work in the morning. I'd rather work at night. The night owls, yeah, it's work shifting. It's, you know, I'm going to work in a different time zone to where I'm at physically, but not necessarily corporately.
Well, and
like, you know, also, I just want to work at night. I want to work in the mornings. I want to clock out by noon. I want to come back at midnight.
Asynchronous communication, right? Using Teams and the tools the right way. If your company can get to the point where what we often say is we're not curing cancer, right? We're not saving lives here. Like we're doing IT. This is people's livelihoods and their businesses. So we take this very seriously, but at the same time, we know that like it's not worth having a heart attack sometimes over some of the stuff that comes in, even though it feels really, really important. And I think that once your organization can get to the point where we can provide information in these threads, right? Like in Teams or in Slack or whatever, where people can read the information and absorb it in their own way. If you have a workforce that doesn't have to be on a shift, like answering a phone, like we have a service desk, if you have other types of information workers or creative workers or software developers or business intelligence leads or whatever they are, they can time shift so that it works better with their personal schedules, or they get the most productive work done between 8 and midnight, and they want to work a little bit like after lunch and they're just available by phone in the mornings if a meeting comes up. Like, give me my 40 hours. That's cool. Like, as your boss, like I just expect that you're going to get your stuff done, right?
Well, it's measuring through KPIs and deliverables versus punch in, punch out.
Yeah. Give me the business outcome, right? Like, did you get these projects done? Yes. Were they profitable? Yes. Was there rework? No. Client happy? Yes. I don't care when you work.
I couldn't agree more.
As long as it's secure and as long as it's productive, and you're a good team member. So, and I think that was we covered a lot of stuff today. So some of it was technology related, some of it wasn't. So I hope that the information sharing and the thoughts were, well received. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Mr. Lakin?
No, I think we touched on a lot of it. I mean, obviously, we're going back, but in what capacity is going to be different for every organization. But what's not going to change is we're not going back to on-premise servers equipment with nothing out in the wild. So it's all about securing your endpoints, securing your workforce and the data that is now cloud driven, and ensuring that you're checking all those boxes and making sure you have somebody watching the doors.
Yep, I would agree. I'd agree. Well, we will be doing more of these. We do them every few weeks and get them posted up. We'll be doing a couple of live webinars shortly. We'll be working with Cisco on some security processes and software recommendations sometime, I believe, in May. And we're just really excited to see everything starting to open up and everybody's starting to get vaccinated, and really just looking forward to a great 2021. So thanks for joining me, Ryan. I appreciate your help.
Hey, my pleasure to be here. Always fun and exciting.
Awesome. And we will talk to you all later. Thank you so much for your involvement. Bye.